Hey, my friend for Everyday Cyclist, my name is Graeme Street. You're joining me here for episode number 551 for the Everyday Cyclist podcast. This is a video cast today. If you're new to my channel on YouTube or cyclecore.com, I do both audio and video podcasts. Today's going to be video. I'm going to be answering your questions concerning cramping on long rides, preparing for your first century, and going to the Alpes and doing multi-day epics, which I know a lot of us are interested in doing. You're going to have to excuse me. My power's been going on and off here. It's April 15th. Strange day today. I just got back from doing a trail half marathon. It's my first half marathon of the year, so you'd think I'd be dog tired right now, but I'm not. All about endurance today, and so if you see the lights flickering, that's just the weird stuff going on outside. It's like 40-mile-per-hour winds. I ran through this stuff today. It was nuts. Any case, let's get right to it, shall we? Oh, by the way, it's siesta time, so I finished my half marathon today, and now I'm drinking my home brew. This is a Citra and Centennial IPA, just fantastic. No better post-run or post-ride than beer for refueling. Question number one, Graeme. Around hour 2 or 3 of long rides, I begin to cramp in my quads, hamstrings, and definitely my inner thighs. Man, that hurts. I know what that's like. Although I drink plenty of water and take electrolytes, I still continue to cramp. Is there something I'm doing wrong or a training suggestion that you can do to help? Thanks for all that you do. Ryan. I've been riding close to 30 years now, and let me tell you, for myself personally, cramping has always been a major issue for me. I was never really born with what I would call a cycling-specific body type. I'm kind of more of a muscle kind of bodybuilder-like setup. So when I got on a bike, I started riding, I was strong for like the first hour or two, and then much like you, I started to cramp a lot. There's some key things here that we're going to discuss. And I can go into this in a lot of detail, but I want to try to be as quick and to the point as I can. So you stated here that about hour 2 or 3, you begin to start suffering from cramps. Typically, it's one of a couple things that can cause this problem. First and foremost is you might be putting out too much energy or too much torque, too much power in that first hour, hour and a half, which is very common for a lot of riders, especially less experienced riders. And even myself, I've been riding for 30 years now, and I still make the mistake of putting out too much power too quickly. And what tends to happen is it tends to seize up our engine. Meaning we're putting out too much of our zone 4 or threshold efforts, and that accumulates quicker than our body can buffer it out. And what happens is, much like anything else in life, we have to pay it back. So by hour 2, hour 3, hour 4, if I've been putting out too much effort, too much lactate from that higher effort too early in the ride, I'll have to pay it back at some point. And usually that's going to come in the form of cramping. I know so many of you are so focused on hydration levels and electrolytes, and although staying hydrated, staying properly fueled, staying a good electrolyte count, especially when it's hot out, is important. Most of you are not cramping because you have an electrolyte or dehydration issue. Most of you are cramping because you either put out too much energy too quickly, or for most of you, the second point is that you probably don't have enough muscular endurance built into your legs, your hips, your core, your thighs, your hamstrings, your quads, training your body as a unit to create ongoing tension into the bike hour after hour after hour. And what I've tended to find with thousands of you around the world, again and again, when we put in more time with creating higher levels of muscular endurance and core functional strength, we see a direct correlation with cramping going down. Let me tell you something. I used to be a rider that no matter what ride I was in, whether it's a competitive ride, whether it was a race, whether it was a tough century, past hour 3, gloves were off, and I'd be cramping like crazy. And this happened year after year after year, even with all the education that I have about exercise physiology, all the common sense that I have about riding and staying hydrated, I kept suffering the same problems. And one of the reasons why was that I was doing a lot of miles back then, and not really focused on the quality of my core and functional strength. If you can believe that. I know I own the company Cyclist. You'd think I always knew this information years and years back, but I didn't. When I first got into riding, I was much like most of us, just go out and ride your freaking bike. And you ride your bike more, and presto, you get stronger. And that works when you're young, but as you get older, that method doesn't work so great. You're going to have to kind of back up a little bit and go back to fundamentals of strength. And more than likely, Ryan, my guess would be is that you're cramping past hour 2 or 3 because you don't have a good amount of muscular endurance. So although you can ride past hour 2 or 3, the tension going through your body, that continual flow of energy begins to go down. And we can rectify that pretty quickly. And again, for people that are using my programs, this is really achieved in the Cyclo 90 base training system. The base system is not about mileage. It's about developing high capacity muscular endurance, or basically the rock bed or foundation for future endurance at higher performance levels. I'll repeat that. The muscular endurance you create during the base phase of Cyclo 90 creates the potential for higher performance at endurance capacity come the in season, which a lot of you are able to reap right now. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'm a cyclist turned runner just over the past couple years. I've just been getting bored with riding 30 years, so still ride my bike plenty, but I needed something different to do. When I started running again, I mean, you want to talk about the need for muscular endurance and cramping, holy crap. I mean, I couldn't run a mile just 2 years ago. I'm serious. I'd get to like mile 1 and collapse. And I'm a strong, fit individual, and I still couldn't do it. So I had to back up and go back to fundamentals of developing good functional strength and capacity within the run. And now I just went out and banged out a 13.1 mile trail marathon in 40-mile-per-hour winds and pouring down rain, and didn't even bat an eyelash at it. What's the difference between those two things? Am I putting in 40, 50, 60 miles a week? No, I'm putting in like 10 to 15 miles a week of running. How does this equate to this? It's simple. When you begin to slowly and progressively challenge your core and functional strength, okay, building a stronger muscular endurance unit for yourself, then the endurance component for riding longer without cramping or running faster for longer without cramping begins to go down. You begin to elevate your basically your resistance to fatigue. And that's more than likely, Ryan, and many others of you, stop worrying so much right now about just the hydration and the nutrition. That needs to be a common denominator. For most of you, you need to back up and go back to the fundamentals of strength. I just got an email from a guy that just finished the Paris-Roubaix, the Sportif edition. So he did the full, Paris-Roubaix just like the pros do, which is a muscular endurance extravaganza. I mean, it's 240 some odd kilometers over cobblestone. Granted, there's not much hills, but man, tough. Basically off the charts level course. If you don't have muscular endurance, you're not finishing, and it's just that simple. And he did phenomenal. And one of the reasons that he pointed out why he did phenomenally was because he put more time into the muscular endurance capacity using Cyclo 90 base. Basically, it means the ability for you to produce more and more tension or potential for power for longer periods of time. And just going out and doing a 3, 4, 5 hour ride at lazy pace, which is what a lot of riders tend to do, doesn't build higher levels of muscular endurance. We need to back up and get more functionally active first, regardless of how long you've been riding, and then begin to roll that forward. So Ryan, my suggestions would be, still hydrate and take the electrolytes and all those things, but go back to fundamental basics. Begin to slowly build some more tension into your legs and your hips. Typically means 1 or 2 rides per week is what I recommend, with a larger set of gears, meaning that instead of being in the 50 in the front and the 18 on the back for a particular part of the road, you're now maybe in the 50 in the front and the 15 in the back. And what that's doing is it's creating more tension. So you might not be going as fast as you could. You may not even be producing as much power as you could, but you're producing a huge amount of torque and potential through your hips, your core, your quads, and your hamstrings, getting them used to working at higher efficiency ratings when they're tired. And when that pays off is months from now, as we've progressed that from week to week, to create higher levels of endurance. And I promise you, I mean, let me put it to you this way. I couldn't go out for a 3+ hour ride just 4 or 5 years ago without cramping, guaranteed, regardless of the time of year. I would cramp, guaranteed. And I went and got the bike fit. I went and did, seeing the Fit Guru and all this other stuff. We got the feet wedged and all. No changes at all, 0. I started changing my electrolyte balance and started consuming water like I was going out of style. I changed what I ate. I changed what I ate beforehand. No changes. I was still cramping like crazy, ride after ride after ride. What changed was the realization for me that I simply had just not built enough muscular endurance to combat the level of fatigue that's coming up at hour 2, hour 3, hour 5, hour 8, hour 9. And now I'm able to go out there and ride 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 hours straight over hard terrain with no cramping. No cramping. And I did that with 2 or 3 workouts per week, 20 to 60 minutes a pop of progressive muscular endurance overload. Again, if you're looking for a system with that, you want to start with my Cyclo 90 base system. It's going to prioritize that functional strength, that muscular endurance base. It's so necessary to move to the next step for the in-season potential. I hope that's helpful for you. Again, muscular endurance, usually then we worry about the electrolytes and the hydration afterwards. Supplement companies don't like me saying that, but I really just don't give a shit. Now, question number 2. Hold on a second. Again, I earned it today, so. Graeme, I have my first century coming up in 8 weeks. I love newbies. I really do. You guys got so much more potential to have so much more fun that an experienced cyclist, you know, for us to get progress, you know, it's like little bits at a time. For beginners, you like these huge quantum leaps of progress you can get in like a couple of weeks. I'm excited for you. Got my first century coming up in 8 weeks. How many miles do I need to do per week to finish in 6 hours or less? Thanks for your help, Wes. Okay, Wes. And all newbies. And newbies, this is usually for riders in your first 3 years. I know you don't want to hear that. Well, I've been riding for 2 years now. I'm no longer a beginner. I disagree. I'd say for the average rider, for the average individual, you don't really qualify to be intermediate until after year 3. Even if you're already a fit individual in other arenas other than cycling. And the reason why is much like anything else is the adaptation phases. The building of the endurance specific for cycling, the power, the function, the body positioning, the muscular endurance in the hips, quads, core, thighs, everything. It takes time to develop. What I try to help people do is expedite it and speed it up. But the most important thing here, Wes, is number 1, instead of asking how many miles you should do in a week, the real question should be how many workouts do you need to do in a week to create enough fatigue or enough stimulus to create enough fitness to finish a century. Because point number 2 is, if it's your first century, Wes, I really wouldn't recommend going in there with some definitive time goal. And the reason why is that although I'm a big proponent of goals, I like setting metrics for myself. I've learned the hard way over 30 years of doing this, both for myself and professionally for others, is that especially with something that's new to you, like doing your first century, is just ride it to ride it. Ride it to finish it. Ride it to experience the moment of completing your first 100-mile ride. Don't dare put an extra pressure on yourself that usually for most of us leads to a pretty abysmal day or performance, because the pressure doesn't allow us to experience the moment. And this is where a lot of cyclists, myself included over the years, have made lots of mistakes. Take it from a veteran that you would be better served to go out there for this ride. Don't give a shit about your time at all, but come into it with a confidence in yourself that you have the endurance and the pacing and the discipline to get from point A to point B to point C to point D, all the way to the end. So when you cross that finish line, finishing your first century, that you're smiling from ear to ear, accomplishing something that's of great value to you. That's the best advice that I can give. Now, that being said, how much time or how much effort is required in the next 8 weeks to get to your century, regardless of the time frame to finish? And again, the other thing too is 6 hours or less. I don't know what the century profile looks like. You didn't specify what ride it is here. So if it's pancake flat with a tailwind, that 6 hours, even at a beginner level, can be pretty easy. If, however, you know, there's like 6,000 feet of climbing and it's all technical terrain with, you know, different tarmac conditions, then it's a whole different ballgame. 6 hours might be the winning time or an elite level time for that ride. So I don't know, and I'm not going to speculate on what that means. What I do know is that you want to be building fatigue over the next 8 weeks, meaning building a set of stimuli from both your rides, on the bike, off the bike, and using techniques and drills to constantly progress or create a system for yourself so that each week you're progressing not just how many miles you've achieved, but how much fitness you have gained. And that's the big one there. How much fitness you're actually gaining from the miles you're doing. I have riders in my local area that are good riders. They could be a lot better if they listen to some of my advice or watch my videos, but that's a different discussion. Someone put in 150, 200, 300 plus miles a week. A lot of miles. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think they get nearly the rate of return that they could get if they were willing to do half of those miles or less and put in a little bit more effort specifically for the things that will get them the greatest rate of return. And this is always a tough discussion with a lot of riders. Many riders, especially more intermediate and advanced level riders, kind of want to close their eyes and say, well, I've been doing it this way forever, and if I decide to change that, I'll lose all my gains that I've made. Heaven forbid I do that. So even though I'm not happy with the results that I really have right now, I'm not making the headway that I should given the time frame that I have available or how many hours I put in, I'm still going to keep doing it because I'm not willing to ask for help, or I'm not willing to think about it in another way. And what fitness really comes down to is the stimulus of fatigue over time. And that stimulus of fatigue can come in a variety of different ways. It can come in a short, high-intensity form. It can come in a moderate duration, moderate intensity form, or it can come in a low-intensity, high-volume form, such as a tough Zone 3 endurance ride. These different modes of building fatigue need to work together. There's no one way, and most riders will tend to err towards the 6 days per week, the longer rides, the slower intensity or the lower intensity, hoping that volume alone will create fitness. Really what volume does, meaning how much time you're putting in, just necessitates more volume, okay? It doesn't necessarily fix the problems, because if you're avoiding the problems, you just look, if I get to hour 4 or 5, my body begins to break down, or I begin to lose form and function. My RPMs go from 95 sustained RPMs to 80 sustained RPMs, and I'm losing energy into the bicycle because I have not built the core and functional strength to sustain this level of performance. Then how many miles you've done previously doesn't matter. Does that make sense? It's important that you understand the difference between how many miles you've done and how much quality training you've put into your body. So Wes, I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is to begin to progress yourself from maybe 4 or 5 hours of cumulative fatigue per week, high intensity training, tempo level training, endurance level training, climbing level training, core and functional training, again, for a total of 6 or so hours per week, and maybe building to a crescendo at week 6 or 7 with maybe 7 to maybe 10 hours in a week, with typically 1 or 2 endurance-focused rides per week. And I'd say that to get to the 6 to the century, regardless of the time frame given or the fitness needed, that you need to accomplish at least 1 or 2 rides between now and then at the metric marker, about 65 miles or 100K. If you can do 100K, you can do a century. Because the tempo, especially at your level, I'm assuming it's your first century. I'm going to assume you're in your first 3 years. Maybe that's a bad assumption, but I'm going to do that anyway. That at that point, it comes down to how much quality you've put in for the ride. And if you can do a strong metric, you can do a strong century, because all you're really doing is extrapolating the same pace, the same tempo of riding, the same discipline of riding for an extra 40 miles. And it doesn't sound like much, but having done ultra endurance events, both in running, triathlon, and in cycling, I can tell you, at past a certain point, it becomes more mental, a state of discipline. And that state of discipline is what gets you your rate of return. And that needs to be practiced in your training. If you're looking for a program, you didn't ask here, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's my video, so I can, that's just the deal. I would recommend at this stage, I don't know if you've used Cycle 90 Base or not, you didn't mention, I would start with Cycle 90 Base. About 8 weeks to go. I'd say just follow Cycle 90 Base exactly as I have it. For weeks 1 through 6, and then 7, and then for week 8, basically the week of your century, you want to basically dial it back a little bit. So use one of the recovery weeks from the plan. For that, you're going to kind of swap those weeks out. From instead of doing a hard week that week, you're going to begin to back it off a little bit. And on the weekend rides, when I have you outside for your in-ride workouts, and typically I structure those for weekends, either Saturday or Sunday or both, that's when you're looking to accumulate or target that metric zone. I'd be looking to target a metric, I'd say, at week 5 and maybe week 6 or 7, early part of the week 7, okay? Good? If you wanted to, you can move into the Cycle 90 in-season if you've already done base. Cycle 90 in-season is a lot more aggressive and really only designed for people that have done my base system first, even if you're an experienced cyclist. Last quick question. Hold on. Got to refuel. And it's crazy out there. It's like 40 mile per hour winds. It's just nuts. It was actually kind of fun running on that. Last question. Graeme, I have a 5-day trip planned to the Alps in July with friends. Killer. I used your base system on and off for the winter. I got stronger, but I didn't stick to the program as much as I should have. I feel a little bit behind. I'm getting ready to advance to your Cycle 90 in season to prepare. Should I use your endurance plan or your climbing plan? Thanks for your help, Mandy. Mandy, having brought many cyclists to the Alps for multiple either one-day events like Tap to Tour or multi-day, you know, like touring events or just going with friends. I know there's thousands of people that go each year to go and ride and follow the pros and this and that, and they're drinking wine and eating cheese and riding all day, 50, 60 miles a day. The priorities of what you need are the same things from the first two questions. Your level of muscular endurance needs to be at a peak by the time you hit there. So I'm not really concerned about how many miles you need to do between now and then. What I need is the ability for you to day after day after day be able to continue to add tension or torque into the bike with decreasing fatigue from day to day. And this is what separates out really a multi-day event from a single-day event when it comes to endurance, is the ability for you to not just have a good day on day one, but to be having a good day on day 2, day 3, day 4, potentially day 5 or 6. I don't know how long you're going for, you didn't specify. And that's when you have to be able to drag out your muscular endurance longer and longer and longer. For any of you that followed me for my BC Bike Race blog from 2013, a 7-day mountain bike stage race, I started getting stronger at day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. A lot of that's attributed to, of course, the muscular endurance backdrop that I had from months previously with the base system. So again, you can see how that falls in line with the other two questions concerning endurance. Concerning which plan to use for going to the Alps, we've done it in a variety of ways. I've had people go to the Alps or an event similar to that, where they're going to do multiple days with friends and 50 miles a day, 60 miles a day, lots of climbing, tough event, with just Cycle 90 base. Because there was years back, I didn't even used to have the in-season protocol. We would just use the base protocol and add some extra miles to it on the weekends. And that's all that we did. And we had people just crushing their performance over there in the Alps. Now, if you've already done Cycle 90 base and you're headed to an event such as going to the Alps or something similar to that, or if you're Mandy herself, I would recommend using the climbing plan first and then using the endurance plan for your glide path on in there into early July. Mostly because the climbing is going to, although there's going to be endurance in the climbing plan, it's more of a strength and technique driven plan. It's a tough plan. It's a 4 or 5 week plan. It's progressive overload, and if you thought the base system was hard, the in-season plans are even twice as hard. Which is why I recommend, if you're new to me, start with the base system first, regardless of where you are in your season. You'll thank me for it later, because I'll catch you up really quick, and then I'll pile drive you into the in-season. Climbing plan first, and then the endurance. It's easier to work from a strength first perspective and then an endurance perspective than it is to work from an endurance perspective and then work on strength. And obviously with climbing, especially something in the Alps, we have day after day of elevated terrain for sometimes 45 minutes to an hour plus at a time climbing. Those are big muscular endurance efforts. I would start with the climbing, especially again if you've used Cycle 90 base to begin. If you have more, it says early July, so I think you have, what, 3 months? That means you have enough time for actually a rotation of 3 plans, give or take. I would do climbing, endurance, and then maybe an extra 2 weeks of the climbing right before you go. But just make sure that you work backwards from the date that you are leaving and allow for at least a 4 to 5 day taper period before you get there. And remember, tapering is not just getting on, sitting on your ass and drinking beer like I am right now. It's mostly a matter of keeping your intensity relatively high, keeping the engine running hot from your previous training from weeks back, but not allowing your body to think that no more work is coming. You want to keep your body and your brain awake. So there will be riding on the taper week, and again, I go over that in the detail with the Cycle 90 in season. You see all these things are linked up together, from the beginner cyclist, first century, the cramping, going to the Alps for 3 or 4 days. The rules all apply. Muscular endurance, strength first, combine that into technique, bringing that outside, beginning to progress that week after week with a myriad of different techniques or drills to extrapolate more muscular endurance, more performance from your zone 3, which is basically your tempo or sweet spot endurance, If you go and look at my Strava accounts, both for running and for cycling, what you'll tend to see from off-season into springtime and into in-season is that I'm able to achieve higher levels of performance with lower and lower heart rates. And that's a good indicator of what you're really looking for, especially for endurance events, is you want to get a greater rate of performance return for less effort on your part. And that is really the true definition of fitness, is being able to perform higher with less stress on your body. If you can do that, you can do anything. And of course, when you finish, make sure you finish with a good beer. I'm a home brewer, so this is part of my refueling strategy. Just one, maybe two.